What is going on, guys? So, we're getting ready for a new week. We're in the second week of our back squat cycle, and we're getting ready for our third week where we're going to 1 rep max. And who doesn't want to set the year off on a good note, set the year off with a new record? So, let's talk about squatting as we get into this third week of our 1 rep max squat cycle. First and foremost, we have to understand that there is no one way to squat. There's hundreds of ways to squat. And depending on where you look on YouTube or what coach you talk to, there's going to be people tell you this is how you squat. There is no one way to squat. You have to figure out what works best for you. And you have to know what your goals are when you squat. When you go into a squat cycle, you want to have your goal in mind. Are you trying to achieve a all-time 1 rep max heavy as you can go squat? Or are you trying to work on your Olympic lifts? Okay, both, you can achieve both. However, one's going to be better for an all-time lift. One's going to be better for your Olympic lifts, your clean and jerk, and your snatch. Generally speaking, when you do Olympic lifting, you squat with a much more narrow stance, and when you power lift, you squat with a much more wider stance. And it all comes down to the muscle groups that are involved when you're squatting. When you're Olympic lifting, your quads are more dominant. When you're powerlifting, your hips and hamstrings are more dominant. So, what are your goals? Obviously, all muscle groups are involved when you're squatting. However, some groups are more dominant than others when we squat. Why is this important for you? Well, whenever people go for a max lift or even a sub-max lift, we as coaches often get asked, how could I get better at squatting? So we're going to go over some things as far as how to get better at your squats. First off, you have to toy around with a different stance to find which stance feels most comfortable for you and your body type. For example, if you have long femurs, you're typically going to have to go a little bit wider than somebody like myself with short femurs. Due to the fact that as you squat, your femur runs into the hip capsule a whole lot earlier than somebody with short femurs. So that's why, again, these are all general statements, but people that are shorter tend to have pound for pound much higher ratios in their squat than people that are taller, because of the fact that short people can have a much more narrow stance, or they can change up their stance a whole lot easier than somebody with long femurs. The second thing you want to think about is, are you trying to get better at powerlifting, Olympic lifting, or fitness? Each requires a different stance. So what are you actually trying to achieve? If you're just trying to be better at powerlifting and you go super wide with your stance, that's cool. If you're trying to be better at ollie lifting, you have to understand that you're probably not going to squat as much as somebody that power lifts, but somebody that power lifts, because of the foot placement, isn't going to be as comfortable squatting with a narrow stance. And it comes down to the Olympic lifts when I'm trying to move my feet. In my pulling stance, my feet are very narrow. And when I go to my receiving position, or the front squat or the overhead squat, I'm going to have to shift my feet a little bit, but I don't want to have to shift them that much because it all has to happen in a split second. So I need to get comfortable in that narrow stance squat. And if I'm trying for fitness, I'm going to be in a much more stable position. I'm just trying to achieve a goal of fitness. I'm not trying to grab an all-time 1 rep max squat, and I'm not trying to be better at the Olympic lifts. So you got to know what your goals are when you set up your stance for your squat. Third is where to focus your accessory work. The problem with accessory work is people generally program accessory work. And what I mean by that is they'll write it on the board and everybody just does the same accessory work. Accessory work has to be tailored to the individual. It's never going to work if it's a general program. Obviously, we can all build up strength in our hamstrings. We can all build up a little more strength in our quads and our calves and stuff like that. But if I'm failing in certain portions of my squat, I'm going to have to spend that time focusing on that part of the lift. For example, if I'm failing at the bottom of the squat, it's my hips that I need to work on my accessory work. If I'm failing at the top part of my squat, I need to focus on my glutes. We all have a limited amount of time in the gym. Why am I going to waste that time spending it doing accessory work that's programmed generically and it's not working on my particular weaknesses? So you have to know where in the squat that you're failing. If you're rounding your back when you squat, If you're failing at everything's looking good, but I just can't get out of the hole of my squat, or I'm getting halfway up and I'm just hitting a wall. You have to know what part of that squat that's failing you, so you can choose to spend your time doing the accessory work in that particular part of the lift. The same concept applies to mobility. When you're doing generic mobility work, you have to understand that you're not going to achieve that level that you need to go. If my hips are tight, why would I spend time spending 3-4 minutes working on my ankles, and vice versa? If it's my ankles that are limiting my range of motion in my squat, then I need to spend my time working on my ankles. Again, we can all be better mobilized in our hips, we can all be better mobilized in our ankles and our legs and everything else, but when I only have a finite amount of time in the gym, which we all have, we need to spend that time working our mobility on our particular mobility restrictions, not one that's programmed for the generic society. When I go into the gym, we program mobility. I'm just trying to work for everybody. I'm trying to think about what we as a group can work on. But before class, that's your time to work on your particular mobility restrictions. And along with that, you see a lot of people that just grab foam rollers and they'll just start rolling on foam rollers. Well, no person that's studies this stuff for a living will tell you the first things first is to grab a foam roller and start rolling on it. It's actually one of the silliest things you can do, is just grabbing a foam roller and rolling on it. It's not going to do anything for you. You have to think about getting warm first and then using these mobility tools to get better at it. You have to understand, guys, when you're squatting, and as we go into this last week of squat cycles, what are your goals, what are your weaknesses, and what are your restrictions in your stance for your squats. Okay? Toy around with different stances during your warm-up sets. Toy around with a different stance. Find what works best for you on that particular day. Don't just say, this is where I always stand, this is where I'm squatting from. Toy around with a different stance. You never know how you're going to feel till you get that weight on your back and start squatting. You may find that the stance that you've been in all along is not the stance for you. Don't do something just because you were told this is how you should stand. Know why you're here. Know what you're going for. Know what your goals are when you squat. And if somebody tells you this is where you should stand, they should have a reason for telling you why you should stand there when you squat. Okay? If the coach can't tell you this is why I'm telling you to squat from this stance, then I'd probably find a different coach. Okay? So think about that, guys, as you're getting ready for your squat cycle. Hope this helps you out. Hope this gives you a little bit of boost of confidence as you go into it, and hope to see some new 100 maxes next week. All right, have a great one.